somebody just asked about how did I get into learning about plants, and always wanted to say gratitude to my next door neighbor, Mrs. Brunn. She was from Ireland. She had flaming red orange hair, and because she didn't know any of the plants here on this land, what she did was she got that good ID book and started to learn the plants, and then she taught us children as we'd walk up the back trails to Alice Lake. So that was the beginning of that journey, which I recognize is like an imprint or a program. So when we learn about our living world, then we want to take care of our living world. So I have a really deep love of everything that really truly exists. I love the stars, I love the ocean, I love all those little creepy crawlers. And growing up in Squamish, you know, we played with crickets, we played with garter snakes, tree frogs. So that was my world. And then later in my life, you know, I studied aromatherapy and herbology and permaculture. And then when I turned 50, I asked Creator, what should I do? What should I do next in my life? And this is what showed up, was to actually come and share what I knew, what was deep in my heart, knowing that it's vital at this time that we understand this system, that we are part of the system, and how do we reintroduce ourselves back in and then walk in a good way. So a few of the other plants that I want to introduce here, this one here is a red elderberry. Okay, it's going to get a beautiful white flower, and they're going to get pollinated, and it's going to produce this red berry. This plant is poisonous. So it's always important to identify those plants and then find out, am I going to get sick by making medicine or eating this plant? I will tell you, you can actually make a cordial with the white flowers, and you can also eat the berries because they're not poisonous, but the seed is poisonous. Now, I want you to know, apple seeds are also poisonous. So do you eat the apple seeds? No. So recognizing that when we know, then we can make good choices and good decisions. Okay? So that's the elderberry. Now, this is red alder. This beautiful tree here, and we can see some people have put some of their initials and some carvings in here. And I love these markings. You can start to see inspiration in, say, some of the West Coast art, right? Because nature inspires us in our creations. And this beautiful tree goes way up, and what red alder does is it actually extracts nitrogen from the atmosphere that brings it down into the root system that feeds the wild berries that are growing up, like the red alder. And I also noticed there's some salmon berries. So when the forest opens, because the trees have fallen over, we get more sunlight in here, and then these beautiful trees come and start to nourish the soil, so they don't last very long, they don't live a long life. We can also get some of our dyes, and it's a beautiful wood for burning for the salmon, to smoke the salmon. So every tree has a different density of wood, right? So this is a good wood for fire. Now, for cedar wouldn't be a good wood because it would burn really quickly. So you knew all of your plants by the bark, right? And then each plant would have had a different relationship for you in growing really strong. What's beautiful about the red alder, and I'm just trying to find some cones here, these are called the catkins, and these are the male part of the red alder, and you can see they're a bit green in color, and if you get lucky, when you shake them, you'll notice this yellow falling off. That's the pollen. And so this could be a food source for us because pollen is high in a protein. And if I collect the male cones and female cones and some twigs So here's some twigs here, and if I took some of the bark off this twig, then I could actually make a medicine that works as a herbal antibiotic. So yeah, this is where I get my health from. But remember, if we've been imprinted or programmed to a certain Western paradigm in medicine, we feel uncomfortable when we go back to our traditional medicines, our native medicines, our plant medicines, right? Because all nations, wherever we're from, had this relationship. So we might think, oh, indigenous people have this relationship. Well, no. Go back in your history. And remember, when I introduced myself, I would share that it's important you know your own stories. Know the stories of the people of this land, but your own personal stories. And when you go back in time, it's like, oh yeah, my auntie or my grandmother knew which plants we could make our medicines from. So talking about our ancestors, what I also wanted to share here is the dandelion. So we can see here's a beautiful plant that is growing on the edges, and we don't find dandelion way deep in the forest. We don't find it deep in the jungles. We find it on the edges, and we find it where people live. So we are spreading the seeds like the birds. And it turns out this beautiful plant is what our ancestors were eating. So if we have ancestry from across the water from Europe, then this is what your grandmothers were eating. And dandelion, it turns out, is a super safe and gentle plant. We can eat all parts. The leaf has an affinity to my kidneys. The root has an affinity to my liver. The flower is taking vitamin D from the sun. And we need the vitamin D to help us to stay strong. And research shares that people with cancer have low amounts of vitamin D. So make sure you're going outside and you're having the sun down on your body, right? We become afraid of the sun, but we're forgetting that it's actually nourishing us. So we should have at least 20 minutes. If your skin is darker, then maybe you need 30 or 40 minutes. And your skin color is just based on melatonin. So some of us have more of it based on where our ancestors co-evolved on the planet. Because when we rub that melatonin off, we're all pink underneath. So just think, we're all actually pink, right? How amazing. So let's remember the sun nourishes us just as much as the plants and the water do. And that these beautiful wild weeds that we were imprinted or programmed to believe that they were no good and we should take poison and get rid of them. That poison is actually going into the water system. That the insects, the aqua insects, the fish are now being exposed to. We're catching that fish and eating it, and we're actually eating that poison. So everything we do to the earth, we are actually doing to ourselves, right? Maybe in a long distance effect, right? That ripple effect, eventually it hits us, just like that little virus did. It started on one part of the planet because it's very polluted there, doesn't have environmental laws, it's making products for us to wear, and now it's traveled all over the planet to ask us to clean up our act, to ask us to remember that this relationship is long and deep and reciprocal. So the dandelion is also an important pollinator plant. So please don't cut those flowers or throw them away. Eat them, make some teas, put these into your smoothies. Discover that that, yeah, this nourishes you. This helps you to live a long life. And that's what one of the things that I've discovered many people have shared. My grandmother ate this until her 90s, or my mother is still eating that root every day and she's 95. So learn who grows with you. Get curious, because it might actually be your medicine or the foods that's going to help you.